You're listening to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast, home of the 2-hour deep dive interview with gold, platinum, and multi-platinum bands, including Stained, Blue Rodeo, The Arkells, Finger 11, Big Wreck, Moist, Bedouin Soundclash, I Mother Earth, Ill Scarlet, Neverending White Lights, Thornley, and many more. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, as well as share, comment, and like. Now let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest. He achieved a level of mastery as the drummer for the platinum-selling and Grammy-nominated band Saliva, and he's currently releasing new music with his band Coldwards. So welcome to the podcast, Paul Crosby. Paul, how are you, and how good does it feel to have just released the band's new single, Bad News? This is less than a week old.
Yeah. Excellent. And first off, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It feels amazing to have just released the new single after releasing our debut record and working that for, a year and a half or so. It's pretty awesome to get this new EP cycle started.
That's awesome. Yeah, I checked out. You released the new music video with it. I've listened to the song a bunch of times, checked out the music video a bunch of times. I'm seeing all these amazing reviews coming out. You're seeing it all over in the press. It's charting already. The numbers on YouTube are huge. So I'm excited. We're going to dive more into that single and an upcoming EP that features that single as well. We're going to work our way there. This is a full 2-hour deep dive interview. We're going to go through your life, your career, discography, and you've done quite a bit before leading up to Coldwards. So we'll make our way there. And I always like to start with sharing with our listeners how the guests and I know each other, just to show the importance of networking, of building community, of fostering relationships. So in our case, I've had drummer John Wysocki, so original drummer for Stained, now with Lydia's Castle. Stained was one of my favorite bands as a teenager, so it was an honor to have him on the podcast. And whenever I have a guest on, I always ask them afterwards, hey, can you think of someone that would make for an amazing interview in the future? And he had one name and one name only. He said Paul Crosby, and that's how we ended up here today.
That's awesome, man. John is a good buddy of mine, and we've known each other for quite a while, through our bands kind of came out around the same time and same kind of genre. He's an amazing dude, man. I love that guy.
Yeah, you must know him back from when Saliva and Stained basically owned the radio waves around 2001, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we never actually did a Saliva Stained tour, but we played all of the radio festivals and all that, and ran into each other quite a bit back in the day. Yeah, we go pretty good ways back.
So I wanted to kick off this interview powerfully. So I have some kind words sent in from the legend himself, John Wysocki. So this is what John says. He says, Paul and I have become good friends over the years. His groove style of playing is what makes Saliva tick. He has a great feel and is a good team player for any band. I wish him the best with his management company. Yet another thing he is great at. So that's from John Wysocki.
That's amazing. Those are very kind words from him, man. That's really appreciated.
So let's take it all the way back to the beginning. You're clearly passionate about music. You've kind of organized your life around music. Where does this love of music come from? Is there an earliest musical memory that comes to you when you think back?
Believe it or not, growing up, no one in my family was really, as far as musician wise, no one was really, it's not like, well, my uncle, my grandpa, my brother, none of that stuff really. All of my older brothers, listened to music and stuff like that. When I was about 11 or so ish, somewhere in that time frame, it was a long time ago. My parents adopted one of my brothers, and he would tell me, he played drums, and he was always air drumming and stuff. And I really looked up to him, and that's kind of where the bug kind of got. I was like, he's cool, and I want to do what he's doing. So that's kind of where the first curiosity of actually, playing drums came from. as far as that aspect. But obviously, as with most creatures, the love of music is just there whenever you hear a good song that resonates with you, and you just grow a passion for that.
And did your brother keep up with playing drums?
He actually didn't. And I only actually physically seen him play on a drum set once. He only lived with us for a few years, and then he moved on, because my parents adopted him when he was already in his teenage years. But he was always air drumming to music and stuff, and I was just um, that's kind of what got the bug going.
And who would you say were your biggest influences as far as drummers? So when you're starting to learn and getting excited, you're looking out at the pinnacle of drumming, seeing what's truly possible if you dedicate your life to practice, to the craft of drumming. Who are those drummers that had already made it that you looked up to and kind of idolized?
Um, I'm a product of the '80s. Like, I kind of grew up in the '80s, so the main drummer that I really was completely fixated on at the time was Lars Ulrich from Metallica. I think before, like, Master of Puppets came out, I wasn't really into rock music at all, and that record like really sucked me into the dark side. But when I was learning how to play, I would put headphones on and try to play along with Metallica, Motley Crue, Slayer, um, all of the cool bands of the '80s kind of genres, with all the good drummers of the time. So that was pretty much my main influences, and then it just kind of spurred from there. And every decade that passed and new genres came out, I kind of ducked and dived into new influences.
Well, Metallica's album Master of Puppets might be the single greatest metal album of all time. So that's a good one to get started on, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more.
And I actually just got back. So I'm in Ottawa and I was in Montreal for the weekend. I was there for the Metallica 2 show weekend. So they did a 2.5 hour set on Friday with Pantera opening. And then they did a completely different 2.5 hour set on Sunday with Five Finger Death Punch opening. So I got the whole Metallica experience, and they actually finished their first set with Master of Puppets, which was unbelievable.
Wow, you got to see the whole catalog. When you're a career band like Metallica and you've been around, you've got all those albums. They probably have more than 5 hours worth of stuff they could play. That's pretty cool. I haven't seen them in recent times, but when I was a teenager, I went and seen them on several tours. Seen the Injustice for All tour. I didn't get to see the Master of Puppets tour, but obviously when I did see them on Injustice for All, they played all of those songs, so it's pretty epic.
That's amazing. Yeah, they have so many hits that even with 5 hours, they didn't play The Unforgiven and a few of their biggest hits. And all the times I've seen them, they play that song. And when I look back to just the previous show on their tour, so just a few days before that, they did have The Unforgiven in. So they're having fun shifting the sets. And even with 5 hours, they have more music than that they're putting in and taking out. So it's pretty cool.
And I'm sure at their shows after that, they circled in those songs as well. So, they probably just change it up every single night to make it really cool. So that if you go to two shows, you don't go, oh, I know the set list. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I had a friend that it was his 100th show going on Friday, and he's not an old guy, so it's not like he's had his whole life to add up 100 shows. So you can buy like a 10 show pass. So he's literally following the band across Canada and the US. So for him, he's actually seeing the different sets every night, just like you were saying. When you think back to your childhood, what comes to mind?
Oh man.
Music kicks in a little bit later, right? You're not like
Later,
5 years old playing music.
yeah. I mean, before music, just how awesome it was growing up being a little kid in the late '70s and early '80s, where there wasn't internet, and not everybody had even video games and stuff at their house, but it was all about being outside all day, riding bikes. You always knew where everyone was at when you seen like 40 bikes out in front of somebody's house, and and we somehow, would be gone all day with no contact with our parents, but still somehow all survived and came home. I mean, that's probably, as far as my, really younger childhood, that's probably my best memory. And also, me having kids now, it's like I kind of feel bad for them because like now it's just inside on a phone or on a video game. They don't get to experience like what we did when we were kids, man.
Yeah, I'm 38, and I think I was at the tail end where for us we'd get home from school, we'd go outside and play road hockey, do whatever. We'd come in just in time to eat. We'd go back out until it was dark. That's you and I were both like that, and then technology kicks in, and you just have the apps and the phones and the iPads
Yeah.
and the social media. So it's a I don't know that it'll ever go back to the way it was, but I have a few more questions about you as a kid. Um, if I were to ask you as a kid what you wanted to be when you grew up, what would you say? So this is probably before the dream of a career in the music industry kicked in. Do you remember any things you wanted to be when you grew up?
Honestly, before the music bug hit me, I was just enjoying being a kid. I really honestly didn't think about that at all. Um, I wasn't one of those kids where I was like, I want to be a fireman or a blah blah blah. I never really thought about that. But I can tell you this: later in life, if I could go back to being that phase of a kid again, I would want to be like an astronaut or work for NASA or something like that. I kind of like I think about that now. I'm like, man, I'm such a space nerd, man. I don't know why that didn't kick in at an earlier age, but again, when you're just out and about enjoying life being a kid and not watching TV and there was no internet and all that, it's a little different thing. But I was just being a kid, man.
Well, they say the key to happiness is living in the present, not
Yeah.
letting the past haunt you, not getting overwhelmed and have anxiety about the future. It's living for today. It seems like you had that figured out as a kid, and maybe we could learn that now as an adult to go back and live that way.
Yeah, and I still live that way today, man. I wing it through life. I just wing it. You know what I mean? Just
If
take it day by day.
if I met you at 12 years old, who would I be meeting? What was little Paul Crosby at 12 years old? What was he like?
You would be meeting definitely hardcore skater kid and beginning stages of metalhead, drummer. I think at 12, I was definitely, playing drums and stuff. But at that point, I was thinking maybe I'll be a pro skater. You know what I meant? Or drummer. I didn't know which one at the time, but I was way more into skateboarding at that time. And that's also how I ended up getting into like, rock and heavy metal music. And that because when you're out skating, especially at that age, you listen to a certain type of music that gets you pumped up to skate. And my friends, actually, that's how I got into Metallica. As I was out skateboarding, and one of the people I was skating with had the big jam box, from the '80s, and he put in the Master of Puppets like the day it got released and hit that, and I was like, oh my god, what is that?
Was
But
that on
yeah, you
cassette?
you would meet more like, and I was into like punk bands too, like Dead Kennedys, DRI, stuff like that as well. So you'd probably meet the more less well behaved, punky type, skater Paul.
Are you still out there living the dream, doing kick flips and ollies and grinds and stuff, or are those days behind you?
No, when I was probably about 13 or so, we where I lived at the time, we had these carports like where you park cars under them, and they were probably 9, 10 feet tall. We had the genius idea to like put a little ramp on top of it and skate and jump off. We had like 5 mattresses stacked up on the ground, and we were like launching off the roof and then like throwing the skateboard and landing on the ground. And I missed the mattresses and I landed on my knee. So I had to have knee surgery. And at that point, I was like, drummer, skater. If I keep skating, I might mess myself up to where I can't be a drummer. So it was kind of right about that time where I said, I'm not gonna do crazy stuff on the skateboard, and I'm gonna focus on drumming. That was like the pivotal point.
And has that knee affected your drumming at all? Like, can you still feel that knee, or did that heal up?
It healed up pretty good. I haven't ever honestly had any issues with it after that because I pretty much, you know, gave up the skateboarding and stuff after that. So
Yeah, I used to, as a kid, I used to skateboard about 8 hours a day. I had the same dream of being either a goalie in the NHL or a professional skateboarder. So I feel you on that one. And we have a fan question sent in that kind of ties in with the knee injury. So Stephanie Morgan asks, what toll does playing drums for so many years take on the body?
I have a lot of lower back issues now. You know, from the I wish I would have used a drum throne that had the backrest, but that's not, you know, cool, you know, at the time. But definitely, I would say the biggest toll is my back, my lower back. I'm feeling it these days, you know, at almost 51 years old. So
Is it is it because you're a little hunched over when you play, or is it like I guess the no support, like you were saying, when you're sitting?
both of those things, and when I play, I don't have normal proper drum posture. I do kind of like lean into it, and I'm kind of all over the place. Um, so yeah, I definitely did a number on my lower back.
So you've been a professional drummer for, I'm guessing, 22 years or more. I'm just going back to the start of Saliva. What are some of the jobs that you had growing up, leading up to doing music full time? People look at you today, they see this, platinum Grammy nominated successful drummer. Our listeners just love to hear that you're a normal human being that had some shitty jobs growing up. They find it amusing. So anything come
Oh
to
man,
mind?
many. um, you know, also having the mindset of there was a point in my life where I was like, music, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So at that point, I wasn't necessarily the best employee because I was like, this job is just temporary. But my first job ever was I worked at a pizza place making pizzas, washing dishes, making pizzas. I still remember the name of it. It was called Hungry Howie's Pizza, and it was in Cary, North Carolina. My dad was in the Navy, so we moved around quite a bit, a little, you know, so lived in a few different little towns and stuff in the beginning. Um, but after that, I mainly worked construction of all types. And then before Saliva got signed, I did HVAC, heating and air conditioning. And I had my own little business for probably 9 years straight. I had employees in the whole nine. Um, which actually was cool because that allowed me to go on the road and stuff and still have a job because I like owned the company, you know. So
Yeah.
that a lot of hot, sweaty construction jobs.
And did you play in many bands growing up before getting the Saliva gig?
Definitely quite a few. The first band I was in was when we lived in Virginia. My dad was stationed there for a couple of years. Um, that band, we never did an actual gig. We had like a mini storage, you know, and we rehearsed there and we had it all set up. There was times where we had like little parties and we played. So that type of a gig. But that was my first, I would say, real band that actually had a band room and a rehearsal schedule. And that's where I kind of honed my chops in at being able to play with other people.
What was the
Um,
name of that band?
I'm trying to remember, man. That one's
Been a while.
Yeah, I can't really remember the name of that band, man. And that's odd, but
See if you guys had played a show, then at least the name would be on the poster and it would be
right.
in there
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah. And I mean, before that, I jammed with a bunch of different people in like my bedroom, you know, and different people coming over. Shortly after that band, my dad got stationed in Bermuda. So I lived in Bermuda for 4.5 years. And moving there, I'm like, man, there's no metal bands in Bermuda. There's not going to be any rock bands. But somehow, some way, I found the few people on the island that were into metal and stuff. So started the very first heavy metal band in Bermuda with some locals I met there, and that band was called Turbulence. And we did many a gigs, and that I was in that band like the whole time I lived in Bermuda, and we did tons of gigs. And so that was my first real band that did gigs and even got paid for gigs and stuff like that.
That's a good
Then I
name. That's a good name for a band, Turbulence.
Turbulence, yeah. And then I actually was going through some old I've got tons of memorabilia that I've collected. I even have drumsticks from that very first band that I don't remember the name of. I saved stuff, but I was going through stuff, and I found a flyer from Turbulence, and it said Bermuda's only hard rock band, and stuff. So that was pretty cool. And then after that, we moved to Memphis, where I actually have some family lineage. My family's mainly from Arkansas and Tennessee. So we moved there, and I was in several bands there, and that's where I got in Saliva as well.
Okay, so let's dive into Saliva and we'll work our way towards Coldwards. So Saliva forms in 1996. They released their debut album in 1997. You joined in 1999. How did you find out that the band was even looking for a drummer?
Well, I I technically joined in 1998. But the funny thing is once I accepted the job with Josie Scott, the singer, original singer, said, "All right," and I'll get to the other part of the story too. We're going to take a few months off, so we'll hit you up when we're ready to go. So then that carried into '99. So, but basically, I was in at the time. Saliva was before Saliva. Josie and Chris DeBaldo, who was one of the original rhythm guitar player for Saliva, were in another band called Blackbone, and they were the biggest local Memphis band at the time. They packed out everywhere. They went on tour and stuff like that on an independent level. That band fell apart. They formed Saliva. Saliva became the number one biggest local band in Memphis in that area. And I had found my way into the number two biggest band in the area. My goal was always to move upwards. So but the band I was in kind of fell apart, and I had actually quit playing drums. I was with who is now the mother of Zach Crosby, who's in Coldwards. I was with her. She was pregnant with Zach, and I was like 25 or so. And when she got pregnant, she was like, "You need to stop the music dream. You're too old for it. The time has passed. You need to like focus on family and working and all that stuff." So I told her I'd quit the other band, and I told her, "You're right. It's over. I've tried. I'm done." And then some months went by, and I got a phone call, and it was Josie Scott, who I knew because the band I was in had done some gigs with Saliva, and that's how I guess he knew about my drumming. And he said, "Hey man, this is Josie Scott from Saliva. Our drummer quit, and I love your drumming. I want you to be the drummer for Saliva. You don't have to audition. If you want the gig, it's yours." And I was like, in my head, I'm like, this is what I've been waiting for. So I said, "Man, I would love the gig, but here's the situation." I told him what I had told my wife, and I was like, can you give me a couple of days to somehow try to,
You
work
got to
this
break
out
the
with her?
news. Yeah.
Right. And he was like, "Yeah, man, just we're taking a break anyway. Let me know." So I talked to my wife, and I kind of beat around the bush. I was kind of dreading it, and I was like, "Look, I know I told you." And she's like rolling her eyes because and I was like, "But Josie Scott called me, and they offered me the Saliva gig, blah, blah, blah." And she said, "You know what? If you would have said any other name, I would have said, hell no. But I know that Josie Scott is going somewhere. So if you don't take this gig, you're dumb." So I was like, "Oh." And then that's how the whole Saliva gig came into play. And then, like I said, I called Josie back, and I was like, "All right, I'm in." And then he was like, "We're taking a break for a few months. So I'll give you a call back whenever we're ready to start rehearsals."
Wow, that's the power of Josie Scott, eh?
Yeah, man.
That's so cool. So you guys signed to a major label. You release your debut album on a major label called Every 6 Seconds. This comes out in 2001. Man, I remember this period in time. So there's three singles: Your Disease, Click Click Boom, and After Me. It goes platinum in the US, selling 1 million copies. What thoughts, memories, emotions come back to you now when you think back to your debut album with the band that essentially launched this lifelong adventure that you've been on?
Well, it was a dream come true, and it was, basically all my dreams came true, and I knew, in my head I wasn't never going to give up, and I was like, I knew for some reason, I knew when I was even a teenager, this is going to happen. I just got to just stick with it. It's going to happen. I'm not going to give up. So obviously, when that happens, it's wow. I just won the lottery, kind of, boom, everything's falling in place. But one of the coolest things was so I told you I was doing heating and air, and we got signed. We went out to LA. We recorded I did all of my drum tracks in about a week for that record. And then I had to go back home and do heating and air while everybody else stayed out in LA for, a month or two and did all of their parts. But what was really cool is, the single Your Disease came out about 6 weeks before the record dropped. So riding around Memphis, like on a lunch break doing heating and air, pulled up to a red light and there's a car beside me and it's pumping the local station and Your Disease is on. And that's like when it really hit me, I'm like, wow, this is happening. Pretty
That's
epic stuff.
That's funny. My next question was going to ask you if you remember the first time hearing your music on the radio, because Your Disease was a top 3 hit in the US. Click Click Boom was a top 15 hit. I was 16 when that album came out, and I was obsessed with Stain's Break the Cycle. Up Here at the Top came out also 2001. And man, I remember those two singles were everywhere, and the music videos were all over the TV, Much Music at the time. What was your life like at the peak of that platinum album, at the peak of the radio play and the success? I'm sure you guys were out on tour playing shows. Almost no human being will experience that level of success as a band. Can you put into words for us peasants what that experience is like?
It's almost indescribable, man. That tour for that album cycle was a little over 11 months. And in that 11 months, I think I was home maybe 4 or 5 days. And that's total, not all in one clip. I remember Thanksgiving of that year, our tour manager said, we're rolling into Memphis at 8 a.m. and you got to be back on the bus at 1 p.m. So, like, we literally got off the bus, went home, did our Thanksgiving dinner, right back to the bus, straight on out. It was a barn burner, man. And also, at the time, again, there wasn't a bunch of fancy cell phone cameras. So, like, now I've got documentation of everything, but back then it's all just up here. And at the same time, all of our dreams had came true. So we weren't real. We were living in the moment, yet again, we weren't really like, oh, I need to write this down or I need to keep a tour log. We were just like living it, like what we all knew was gonna happen, or what we all like were dead set on happening, was happening, and we were just like, boom, our time has come. I mean, it's pretty hard to put into words that feeling. It's like, like I said, it's like, I guess it would be the equivalent of winning the lottery, just life changing stuff.
Yeah, if going platinum and selling 1 million copies isn't enough, if having these top 3, top 15 singles isn't enough, the album gets nominated for a Grammy. So Best Hard Rock Performance at the Grammys in 2001 for the song Your Disease. What does that nomination mean to you? I mean, that's your country acknowledging your hard work. And your talent. There's nothing more prestigious than a Grammy for a musician. So what does that nomination mean?
I meant more icing on the cake. And the thing is we got Grammy nominated for our very first single we ever released. It was just mind blowing, upward trajectory, and then getting that invitation to the Grammys in the mail and going to the Grammy. It was just like, again, almost hard to put into words, I have my Grammy nomination,
Oh, I
certificate
can
up
see
on
it
the
up
wall
there.
here.
Yeah.
It's I look at it every day and don't forget where I came from. Those don't, not a lot of people get those that you and I know, and even platinum records. Like in this day and age, it's almost impossible to actually get a platinum record. So it's pretty crazy. We were from kind of that last cycle of when you could get platinum and gold plaques. People actually bought physical product and stuff.
So the second single, Click Click Boom, this was featured all over the place. So it was in movies like Fast and the Furious, The New Guy, Talladega Nights. It was in a bunch of video games like UFC and Project Gotham Racing. I remember it being all over the place. How important is it for bands to license their music out to different mediums like movies and video games to generate additional revenue sources, but also to keep getting music out to a wider and wider audience?
Super important. And coming from the management side, that I'm artist manager now, music is basically free now. So bands don't make a lot of money on their actual music without licensing. That's super important for a band. If you want to make money outside of touring and merch, which is pretty much where bands make their money, licensing is super important. And back then it was even more so. I mean, it expands you to a gigantic audience that you probably wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. So it takes whatever success you're having and multiplies it, several fold. Pretty epic. Also, if you want to hear a cool story about how the song Click Click Boom was written, it's probably the coolest story of any song on that debut record. That whole record was written in our rehearsal room, and again comes full circle because we at the beginning we had a mini storage, or roll up mini storage, no heat, no air. The bathroom was like way up by the office. You had to go up there. We wrote that whole record in that mini storage, and we got signed. The label came out. We played the whole thing for them, and our A&R guy came out, and he was like, "Love it. It's a great record, but I just think that there's just one song missing. We need one more like big song." And Josie Scott said, "I've got this idea I came up with like yesterday," and he just tapped on his chest and he was like, click, click, boom. That's all he had, and we were all instantly like, "That's great!" And the A&R guy, "That's it. Get in there." So we went right in the jam room like immediately and threw that song together in 30 minutes.
That's such a rock and roll story. Like
Yeah,
it's such a typical, some of the best songs are just kind of written on the spot.
just right there. He just had that riff idea in his head, and he tapped the thing, and he had that click click boom part, and we knew that was money. So
It reminds me, I've had 3 different Finger 11 members on the podcast, and they were talking about their hit Paralyzer that's like 5 times platinum.
I love that band.
Yeah, yeah, and they were saying that song is a complete accident, that they had booked a photo shoot and they had all their equipment set up and they were jamming, waiting for the photographer to show up, and he basically never showed up. So they're about to start packing up and the guy shows up at the last minute and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry I'm late. I'm here for the photo shoot." And they're like, "Well, I guess we'll do something for this guy." And they just at the last minute on the spot to have a performance while the guy's shooting, they kicked into this little riff and they built that song on the spot around it for this photographer who is late. And that's the story behind Paralyzer. So
You want to know? It's funny. I've heard that about a lot of bands' biggest hits. It's the one that they put like the least effort in, or just came to them. It just kind of wrote itself. It's pretty insane.
it's almost like the musicians and the bands are just the conduit to some like infinite intelligence or higher source that is like providing this song, and you were just in tune, ready to receive, and it came through you at that moment.
That's it. You don't write those songs. The universe does, and your antenna just happens to be up at the right time. You're correct.
So man, you guys had such a quick turnaround from that album. So in 2002, just a year later, you guys released Back Into Your System. 3 singles: Always, Rest in Pieces, and Raise Up. It debuts in the top 20. It goes gold, 500,000 copies sold. Were you feeling massive pressure to follow up the platinum success of the last album before this one?
Absolutely. There's an old saying, you have your whole life to write your first record, and you've got about 6 months to write your second one. So we were concerned about the sophomore jinx and all that, but we got lucky, and always actually was a number one single on the mainstream rock charts. So that was our first number one. And that album is, it may be platinum now. I haven't checked lately, but it was teetering on it like a year or so ago. Because that, again, that was getting into the time frame where people started, streaming, pirating music and buying less physical copies and stuff. So I think if it weren't for that, it probably would have sold way, way more. But we were extremely lucky again, and had some more fire.
Yeah. So now that we're in 2023 and I can look back at Saliva's entire career. So the band has had 39 singles, and to this day, Always is still the band's only number one single. So does it have a special place in your heart being the only number one? I mean, it's hard to have just a hit. It's almost impossible to have a number one hit.
You're correct, and it does. And here's another fun story about Always, the writing of Always. We were in the studio with our producer, Bob Marlette, who produced that record. He produced our first two records. And we didn't have that song written when we got to the studio. So we were kind of writing with Bob. And at first, when we were like working on that song, I hated it. I couldn't stand it. I don't know why, but it was a different time. I didn't feel like it was Saliva. It felt different than our other stuff. And I remember even getting mad in the studio and throwing my drumsticks down, and I don't want to, I'm not tracking this, blah 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 blah. And I walked out of the studio, and the producer came out, and he chatted with me, and he was like, look, man, I get it. Let's just do me a favor. Let's just track anything that we write. And if at the end of the day we decide against it, we won't put it on the record. Let's just record it. Just give it your best shot. And I was like, he talked me into it. So, and then of course it's our biggest song ever. And so from that point on, I kind of had the mentality of, look, if we're writing a song and I don't like it, we should record that song.
Yeah, if you don't like it, that's how you know it's going to be a hit, apparently.
I love the song. Obviously, it grew on me, and I was younger and a different mentality, and still kind of new to the game at that point. And plus, coming off of the success of the first record, you start getting a little bit of that ego when you're younger, which I have no ego anymore, but I definitely did back then. I think we probably all had a little bit of it.
When I talk to musicians now and they think back to when they were releasing their albums, all they remember are the negative reviews for some reason. That's just the way that we're wired. So I was able to dig up two positive reviews about this album that I thought might get you in the feels when you think back. So All Music praised the band for making the album focused in its overall sound and musicianship, concluding that the best thing about Back Into Your System is that the disc doesn't seem to pander to rock radio as much as others of its ilk. It still managed success regardless on radio. Then the internet publication Melodic also praised the band's commitment to delving deep into crafting solid musicianship while still retaining a semblance of their given genre. So a couple positive reviews to think back on that album.
That's pretty awesome, man. And even still to this day, I was always in the mindset of, and everyone in the band was at the time, don't pay attention to the reviews. Don't pay attention to the negative press. Most people that write those articles, especially the negative ones, couldn't even draw a picture of a music note. They're like not musicians or journalists. So we always just kind of avoided, reading comments and all that stuff. But that's pretty awesome, though.
So in support of that album, you guys went out on a 32-date nationwide tour. Breaking Benjamin was on the bill. For some of the dates, I believe in the UK, Stone Sour was on the bill. So this is an amazing tour. You can see up here, I have Breaking Benjamin's album Phobia. And I had their drummer Chad Zaliga on the podcast one of my favorites. What do you remember from that tour? What were those shows like at that time? It sounded like a really solid bill.
Amazing. And Breaking Benjamin are those dudes are super awesome dudes and obviously killer musicians. I mean, you can't really find a better crop of, better musicians than that. I do remember that tour. And you know what the funny thing is looking back, we took a lot of bands that are really big now on their first or some of their very first tours. Breaking Benjamin, Flyleaf, Hellstorm, all of those bands were like the first slot openers on tours, way back in the beginning of their career. But, music was, I don't know, it was a lot cooler in that time. Like there was, there was just a better vibe. Everybody was into it. Those tours were great. And I remember the Stone Sour tour in Europe. They were headlining. We were direct support. Corey Taylor's an amazing dude. Those are just really good times, man. All the bands, there was no competition. It was like a big family. Everybody hung out, and it was really, really epic times, man.
A lot of those bands you mentioned are still going strong now, which is crazy all this time later.
Absolutely. They're bigger than Saliva.
So 2004, you guys released Survival of the Sickest, two singles, Survival of the Sickest and Razor's Edge. These are top 10 and top 20 hits. The album is a top 20 hit. Then 2007, Bloodstained Love Story. This one stands out to me because Ladies and Gentlemen was a massive hit. It went to number 2, was certified gold. So it's the band's only gold selling single. I guess my question is what were crowds' reactions like when you played Ladies and Gentlemen live? It has, to me, when I hear the song, it sounds like it's being performed live. So I can picture it going over really well live.
Absolutely, man. The lights would go down and the Sweeney would hit that. And you just heard the roar of the crowd. Everyone was waiting for that one. That one in Click, Click, Boom, we always had to play like, later on in the set. But then eventually, after a while, Ladies and Gentlemen was always our opener because it's kind of like a welcome to the show kind of thing. Pretty epic. And that song also was on a huge PlayStation, I think it was PlayStation 2 commercial. We got a huge licensing deal from Sony. I think it was 6 months or so. And they used that to promo the PlayStation 2 console. If you can look up on YouTube or whatever and see the Sony commercial. And it was also exclusively at every Walmart. So when you went to a Walmart in that time frame, that song was playing in that little commercial on repeat in every Walmart, all over TV, everywhere. I mean, we got a huge deal. It was a pretty good chunk of money for that as well. And the other thing about that album too is we were kind of in a little bit of a slump. And it was kind of like a make or break for us at that point. The label, it was kind of like if we don't have another big hit, we might get dropped. You know what I'm saying? So, and again, we were in L.A. writing with Bob Marlette, who produced that. He didn't produce Survival of the Sickest, but he produced that album. And we were writing with him. And we had a bunch of songs written. And again, Bob was like, man, we have some good songs, but we need like the one. And Wayne Sweeney said, I've got this idea I just came up with. And all he had was that.
The harmonics.
And Bob was like, score. That's it. We got right to work. The same thing. 30 minutes later, there it was.
The PlayStation 2 went on to be one of the best-selling consoles of all time. So Sony had that good money lying around that they could fork out for the right song placements. I always felt, it's funny you mentioned Click Click Boom along with Ladies and Gentlemen. I always felt like Ladies and Gentlemen was like a sequel to Click Click Boom. Like they kind of have that same energy to them.
Yeah, and they both say boom. They both have the boom
In the chorus, yeah.
We rode that out, man, as our kind of like little trademark, and it kept working. So we kept doing it, I mean, why would you stop?
That's like the equivalent of Disturbed's that wah that they have.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's kind of the same. Also, not to backtrack, but we kind of missed out that like in the first record, we were also played WrestleMania 18. And I think there's a performance you could see of Superstar. And then we did a WWE theme for the Dudley Boys, which we played live at the Toronto Sky Dome. while the Dudley Boys came out to, go do their match.
That's like
That was,
55,000 people.
and then I don't know, like 30, 40 million pay-per-views. And it was live too. So I think I don't really get nervous before I go on stage. I get antsy, like, but I was nervous, like, because you can't mess up. If you mess up, everybody's going to see it right now. So it was a lot of pressure, man. But also that's one of my best memories of this whole thing. That was like one of the highlights.
That's such a big venue. I lived in Toronto for about 11 years. So I've seen a few shows there. I saw Roger Waters perform The Wall in its entirety at the Sky. Well, it's not the Sky Dome anymore, but yeah, I've seen Bruce Springsteen there. Lots of great concerts. So I can't imagine it's such a big venue. And then knowing there's like 30 million people watching as well. That's the entire size of Canada. So it's like everyone in this country I'm in watching that show.
It was pretty much, yeah, no pressure, no pressure. And I think also that year, I'm sure they've broken this record, but that year for the WWE for WrestleMania, it was a world record breaking light show they had too. So, and that's the equivalent of playing the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't really get much bigger than that.
So as a Saliva fan, I could talk Saliva all day. I could use up the 2 hours for sure. I'll do one more Saliva question, and then we'll leave an hour for Coldwards, for your management company and all that stuff, if that's okay with you. So the band releases 5 more albums between 2008 and 2016. So Cinco Diablo, Under Your Skin, In It to Win It, Rise Up, and then Love Lies and Therapy. So Love Lies and Therapy was your last album with the band, but then you did play on 2 singles after that. So Revelation Man and Crows. Is there any insider behind the scenes information you can share about those 2 singles? Either the writing or the recording or the release of them, because Crows ended up charting, which is awesome.
And it got on Octane Test Drive as well. It's a great song. At that point, Wayne was living in Memphis. I live in Houston now. I've been here since 2009. Bobby Amaru, who is now the singer of Saliva, and he was the singer for those songs. Him and Brad, the bass player, lived in Jacksonville, Florida. So at that point, we all have our home studios, and people would just kind of send ideas over. And Bobby sent those 2 songs and was like, "Hey, can you track drums to these?" And I actually tracked drums to a handful more songs, but they ended up not getting used. I mean, we were just kind of writing and tracking everything we could and then picking the best. Yeah, I mean, it was pretty cut and dry. He sent me those songs. I knew instantly they were great and went right in and tracked the drums, sent them back, and they kind of just went from there.
So let's dive into Coldwards. So when I look at a breakdown of the names of the members in the band, there's a couple other Crosbys in there. Can you share with our listeners your relation to Sean and Zach Crosby?
Sean Crosby is my firstborn son, and Zach is my secondborn son. They're my 2 oldest kids of the 6 that I am a father of. Yeah, they're my kids, man. It's pretty epic to be jamming in a band with my sons. So
I actually have some kind words here from one Sean Crosby. So hopefully he says something nice about his dad here. So,
oh boy.
So Sean says, "My dad is super dedicated, knowledgeable, and driven. He's always 1,000% professional. He's helped me push my limits a handful of times too, and only for the better. Even if we didn't agree about it at the time." Laughing emoji. So that's from Sean Crosby.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. But yeah, I try. My sons are extremely talented musicians. So, but they've never done this on a professional level. So I've honed them in, to try to teach them the correct format and ways to do things. And and like Sean said, sometimes we disagree on stuff, but it's all for the better. And the cool thing is I can be a little harder on them when it comes to the writing and stuff, because I'm also the dad. So I have that permission to, be a little stern. And they always come out of it with, you know what, you're right. If I Because I push them, and then it takes what they have that's already really good and makes it even better, and then they thank me for it. So it's, I'm just passing on that knowledge of what, I've learned throughout my entire journey.
And have you been jamming with them since they were young, or is this later on that you started jamming kind of as a family?
Well, they both have been into music on their own. I never pushed them since they were like little kids. And I started teaching both of them kind of how to record probably between, 10 years old or somewhere in that age. So I always knew kind of that they were going to be in their own bands. I never envisioned being in a band with them. It's epic as hell, but we never really jammed together. They just were like, would send me their stuff from their own bands or their own music they were writing, and I would be like, that's awesome, great. The jamming together thing didn't happen until, the whole Coldwards thing came into play in like 2020.
And I'm surprised that neither of them is a drummer, unless they also drum but play other instruments and sing. Did they not gravitate towards their dad that played drums?
Um, I remember when Sean was probably 10 or 11, I bought him a drum set, and I sent it to him. He was living with his mother. And I think, he learned how to play. I think he might have played for like a year or so, but both of them kind of figured out from a young age that you get more attention when you're up in front of the stage.
Smart
So
boys, smart boys.
yeah, yeah. So they kind of, Zach was always, he came out of the womb singing, man. So, um, so yeah, Sean kind of grew an interest in guitar, and that was much cooler. So they skipped the drumming thing. A drumming dad can only hope, though, But it's a good thing that it worked out that way, because now we have a band together, and there can only be one drummer.
Yeah, you would have ended up with three drummers in your band if it turned out that way. Do your kids think that their dad is a rock star or just some schmuck at home?
They think I'm just their dad. That's all I've ever been to them. I mean, they know what I do for a living, but it's just been my job. They grew up around it, so to them, it's nothing. And now my littlest ones, my younger ones, um, they don't even have any perception of it. My two youngest daughters are 12 and 13, and they know obviously I'm in a band, but it was funny because like we were on vacation a few weeks ago, and I was making some smug comment about, yeah, your dad's, cool, blah blah blah, and they're like, whatever. I was like, don't believe me, Google me. And then my youngest one Googled me, and she was like, oh wow, like they're just busy being kids, they don't care about that.
They weren't around during the peak Saliva days, so they would have to check out YouTube and Wikipedia to see all that stuff.
Zach and Sean definitely were. Um, Sean lived with his mom, but every summer he would come out on the road with me for 2 or 3 weeks and ride the bus. That was the time of his life. Um, Zach was around it. Both of the boys were around it from day one. So they seen all of the big MTV stuff and all that good stuff.
And where did the idea of starting a band with Sean and Zach come from? So you mentioned it's been a few years now with Coldwards, but how does that originate, that idea?
It wasn't really. It didn't start off being let's start a band together. It was actually the COVID-19 lockdowns happened, and so the bass player of Coldwards, Richie Hay, he's one of my best friends. I was locked in my house, and I was bored, so I just started writing my own, songs for myself. And then Richie started coming over and throwing bass down and collaborating on some ideas. And then me and Sean were on the phone one day, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm just writing some stuff, bored, writing some songs, let me send you over and see what you think." And he's like, "Hey, this is cool, Dad. Can I sing a verse on that song?" Kind of started like that. And then, so we were just kind of writing some stuff together just for no intended purpose, just to burn time. And then Zach heard some of it, and then he was like, "Let me get in on that." And then it kind of slowly morphed into, as songs were coming up and they were getting better and better. And it still wasn't a idea of let's be in a band. It was, let's write some songs and maybe release a couple, just father and son stuff. Then that morphed into let's do an EP. Then we have 10 songs. We're doing a record. Hey, this stuff is really, really good. And everybody hearing it was like, this stuff is really good. You guys should like do something with this. So then I shopped to some labels. We got an offer from Wake Up Music Rocks. We signed a deal with them. And then we were like, well, I guess we're a band.
And where did the band name come from?
There's really the thing about it is in this day and age, it's super hard to name a band. All the cool names are
It's all been taken. Yeah.
There's only so many names in the English language. But I think I was coming up with, like, even before we had a name, I was coming up with I was like, okay, we're going to do an album. Let me start looking around for artwork ideas. And I had this idea of this like hospital ward, creepy kind of dark hallway kind of thing. So originally we were calling the band Coldwards, like the hospital ward, like dark, dim, cold wards. So that's kind of where it came up from, that picture I had that we were going to initially use. I was like, how about cold wards? And everybody was like, yeah, I like it. We like it. So we kind of went with that. And even during our initial press releases, like the very first few interviews that I ever did, I was calling the band Cold Wards. So, but then I was kind of like, man, I think we should change it to be pronounced Cold Words, because it's a direction towards the cold and towards those cold wards. And it's a wordplay, cold words. Those are some cold words, So then everybody liked that better. So we kind of pulled the switcheroo.
And what would you say is your favorite part of being in a band with your sons? And then I guess, what are the challenges? Because there have to be some challenges as well.
Well, my favorite part and the best part is being in a band with my sons. I think that would be like, you grew up playing hockey. I bet if your dad was a hockey player, it would be awesome for him to play hockey with his son. Some dads like are into hot rods, and so they want to build cars with their sons. It's kind of the same for me as a musician. And like I said, I always knew that they would be in bands on their own, but I never really kind of thought we would be in a band together. And there's not really a lot of challenges, man, because they're super talented. Like, I don't have to, beat anything out of them, man. They're full of great ideas. I'm full of great ideas, and we collaborate really well. And I mentioned me and Richie and our other guitar player, Michael, we all live in Houston. Zach lives outside of Memphis, and Sean lives right outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But they all know how to record, and they all have their own home studios. So even though riding long distance, it's still not even a challenge, because we all have the technology and the know-how to put it all together.
So the podcast, we have some diehard listeners that tune into every single interview, regardless of who the guest is. So for our listeners that will tune into this, that maybe haven't heard the band's music yet, how do you describe the band's music?
If I had to, unfortunately, we have to put genres on things. So I would say we fit more into the alternative metal, kind of. Even if we came out in the early 2000s, I think we would be kind of listed under more like nu metal. But we try to write songs directly from the heart, whatever comes out. We don't put any preconceived notion on what kind of band we are, what kind of songs we want to write. We just take all of our variety of influences, and we all listen to, everyone in this band has a completely different playlist of types of stuff they listen to. And I think that puts us in kind of a unique category. Sure, you can hear some of our songs and go, that's got a touch of this band or a touch of that band, but it's hard not to, your influences to not come through. But I think that we're kind of different than most everything that's out there currently.
Yeah, so let's talk about the debut album. So Bloodwork comes out in 2022. I listened to the album with a good pair of studio headphones, probably 5 times, to really sink my teeth into it. And here are the notes that I have. So has a throwback sound to the early 2000s rock, but also sounds current because of the electronic sounds and the very high quality recording. It's heavy, yet accessible because of the polished recording, the hooks, and the harmonies. The album is full of badass guitar riffs and heavy drums. Does that sound like a
That's
decent description?
that you nailed it. That's actually really good. Actually, I need you to send me that so I can use that to submit to other. Here's what we are. That's great. That nails it, man.
Yeah, while I was listening, I found like it kind of checked off all the boxes where it has the vintage sound you want, but it still sounds so current because you're hearing a lot of music that's heavy but has kind of an electronic influence on it. Is that Zach that seems to be the one that's into the electronic stuff?
Yeah, and believe it or not, so before that story about where I told you Master of Puppets led me into the dark side of, turned me into a metal fan. Before that, I was only into like R&B and kind of hip hop and stuff, like up until that point. Zach is, although he grew up with, the new metal era and seeing his dad do all that stuff, he's always been into rap and hip hop. That's what he does. His specialty, man. He's got rap songs I could send you that'll blow your mind, man. He's an incredible, rapper. So what he's also been doing, the last few years is he makes beats and he sells them. So he's well versed in Fruity Loops and all of that software. So yeah, he comes up with all the electronic stuff, all the loops, samples, and that's one of the element that he brings to the band on top of his amazing, vocal range and stuff. So he does all of that on the recordings, and then live we just have that playing on a track, so he can just be the lead singer.
Yeah, sometimes music is so heavy that it's not accessible to a certain part of the population, and it's hard to get radio play because it's just so heavy. And I find that this album, like, it's really heavy. There's some like really heavy riffs on there, but it's such a great sounding recording. It's very polished. I'm saying that in a positive way, not in a negative way. It's just, you found a way to record and mix so that despite it being heavy, it's like it's not overwhelming. Like, it's still a pleasant listen. And it's like, even though you're heavy, you're not afraid of melody, and you're not afraid of hooks, and you're not afraid of harmonies and the things that stick with you long after the song is done. So I feel like despite how heavy the music is, that it's still perfect for radio, which is probably why you guys are receiving radio play.
Absolutely. We have this ability to push it right to the very edge of what's going to work, without going over that line of it's too heavy, it's not heavy enough, so we've been fortunate to have kind of like that knack. And again, some of that comes from my experience being in a radio band, kind of knowing the market and kind of what's acceptable and what'll confuse everyday listeners who aren't musicians. And as I mentioned, we all record our own parts. I record my own drums, and I usually record mine and Richie, the bass player's parts. Sean records his own guitar parts and vocals. Zach records his own loops and his own vocals. But at the end of the day, we work with a really super talented mixer named Jonathan Dolis. He runs a studio called Concrete Studios out of Nashville. So we do all of the tracking, all of the editing, and then we send it to him, and he like puts that polished spin. He had us dialed in from day one. I mean, he just knew what we were going for, and he nailed it. So we continue to use him. He also mixed Bad News, and he's mixing the other songs on the new EP and all that. So we found a good team of what works, and we just roll with it.
So the album, even though it only came out last year, it has 1 million spins on Spotify, which is ridiculous. I think you have the Spotify plaque beside you. Is that the one for the album?
That one right there is a 50 million one from Saliva, but I do have a Spotify plaque for the 1,000,000 streams for Coldwards next to it.
Okay, so what does that fan response mean to you, that there's 1 million plays on this new project?
It's awesome, man. When we decided to do this and release the record and stuff, our expectation was we're going to do a record as father and sons with some friends and throw it out there. And to us, that was the goal. That if we could accomplish finishing a record and putting it out there, we already accomplished everything we wanted to with it. So having it being well received and being able to continue on. We signed another deal with Wake Up for our new EP. They want to keep working with us. It's having success. It's doing good on the charts. It's just icing on the cake, man. Um, we're just blessed to be able to do this band as father and sons, and even have the ability to put a good sounding record out, and just having people love it is even better, man.
So I'd love to dive into 4 or 5 of the songs more specifically, if that's okay with you.
Of course.
So the album kicks off with "I Told You So," and I guess an example where you're saying it's heavy, but it's just mixed in a way that's still accessible. So the song starts with some heavy screams, with the "I Told You So," yet it's mixed, so it's still pleasant despite the screaming. And I guess the other notes I have on the song are, there's a mix of electronic drums and then recorded drums on that song. Is it easy to pull that off live?
Yes, because like I said, we put all of the samples on our backing tracks. We're not like one of those bands that puts like all the vocals and stuff on there. We just put like Zach has his whole DJ set up, and initially we were gonna have him running the samples and singing, but we want him to be, he sings a
A
lot, so
front
we want
man, yeah.
the wireless mic and focus on that. So that makes it easy because we have that on track. We play to a click, and those electronic parts play along with where they need to be while I'm playing real drums.
Yeah, it's just the stuff you can't recreate live with instruments. I mean, they're
We
electronic.
could, but it's like it's going to take away from the show.
True.
It's cool having a guy running around with a wireless mic, and then when the songs that Sean doesn't play guitar on, they're both out there with wireless mics. We were kind of more looking at it toward what's going to make the show present better.
That's probably what the focus should be. The song "Stained on You," that's the band's most popular song on Spotify. So 343,000 plays. Why do you think people love that song so much?
Um, you're right, man. We got so much good response from that. I think it's that same thing. I think it's just that perfect mix of heavy, but with like $1 million hook, and people that aren't necessarily into really heavy stuff. It's just under that line of where it resonates with them still without them going, oh, that's just too heavy for me. I think it's just got the right mix of all the elements you know, that target the masses.
So the songs "Perfect" and the songs "You," they feature an acoustic guitar throughout the songs. Does the band ever play acoustic sets? Because I feel like the songs actually would translate well live, stripped down.
We haven't yet, but we are definitely planning on, at some point hitting radio stations doing acoustic. We definitely, it's in the cards later on. But right now we don't, because we haven't really got that far yet.
Hmm. The song "Welcome to My Winter," so it features Saliva singer Bobby Amaru. How does this collaboration come together? I'm sure it's the Saliva connection, but where does the idea of featuring him on a song come into play?
Well, at the time we were, doing the first record, I was still touring with Saliva. And all of those dudes are, my best friends. I love all of them, past members, current members. I still get along with everybody. And so we were still on tour, and I was playing some of the stuff. At that point we were writing a record together, and we'd be on the road, and I would play Bobby. Bobby's an amazing songwriter and a good producer, and I was playing stuff for him and the other guys to kind of trying to get some feedback. And then I was thinking, well, I think for our debut record, since we're a brand new band, it would probably be good to try to get a couple of features because it'll help bring more attention to the record that we might not get. If people see featuring so and so and so and so, they might be curious and check it out and then like the rest of the record. So I
It
actually,
gives some extra credibility to it as
yeah,
well. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually Welcome to My Winter is a song that I had written. It was probably one of the ones that I was writing on my own before I sent it to, let Sean and Zach hear it. Um, so I'd already been working on that, and I just asked Bobby. I was like, "Hey, man, would you want to do a feature?" I mean, like, I didn't have to really reach out to him. I'm like, I'm in Saliva. Why not? Why not get Bobby to do a feature on it? So I asked him, and he loved the song, and he said, "Sure."
So you guys have made music videos for half of the album, so 5 songs. You have music videos for Say Something, My Skeletons, Stained on You, Whirlwind, and Perfect. The videos have 1.2 million views. Can you give us insight into the making of any of those music videos, what that experience is like? Our listeners that have never made a music video don't know what goes into that.
A lot of hard work, sweat, and tears. And here's the thing too: is the boys, my sons, had never. Again, they were great musicians, but at this point, they hadn't ever done anything on a professional level. I don't think they'd even been at any video shoots that I had done, even when they were younger. So I used all of my knowledge, and I basically ran the whole video shoot. Obviously the directors, were they knew what they were doing, but they're doing getting the shots. So I had to school them on, picking out, get all the wardrobe, all of the stuff that we had a whole staff of people doing for all of the big Saliva videos. I retained that knowledge, and I was that person. So it was super cool. The guy who did several of the videos, Thomas Crane at Kill Devil Films, he's such an amazing vision. He's done a bunch of Saliva videos, recent videos. That's actually how I got to work with him, was because he was filming some Saliva videos, and then whenever I would needed Coldwards videos, I just reached out to him and I was like, "Hey, man, would you want to do some videos for us?" But again, pretty epic experience is getting to do that stuff with my sons, man. Long, videos. People that don't know, they see videos, and let's say the song's 3.5 minutes, they think it took 3.5 minutes to do the video. It's hours. It's a full day, repeated shots. You probably do 1,000 shots and only like 20 of them get in the video. So
And then there's all the work in the post production afterwards as well.
right. Oh yeah, that's what the directors do. Yeah, it's like weeks of them in front of a computer editing, finding all the weeding through all of those thousands of shots and picking the right ones.
Yeah, so I went and watched all 5 music videos for this album, and they all look incredible. Like there's like a thickness to them. They look super professional. The lighting, I thought all of them were great. And I actually reached out and I got kind words from Thomas Crane. So this is what Thomas has to say. Let's see here. He says, I met Paul for the first time when I worked with Saliva, and I've had the chance to work together on Coldwards and various other projects. Paul is a consummate professional, a great drummer, and he's awesome to be around. I love working together. So that's from Thomas.
That's awesome. I love all the kind words. I had no idea that you were going to reach out and do that. It's pretty epic. You're making me blush.
That's good. Yeah, no, it's we were talking last night, and you're sharing all the things you were up to and all the bands you manage, and I was asking if you ever sleep, because it's you have so much going on, and I can't knock the hustle, and sometimes when you're working that hard, it's like you don't have a moment to step back and soak in all that you've done. So I love reaching out and getting kind words from people that the guests care about, because it just allows you to kind of absorb what you mean to others, and how your work has impacted others in a positive way. So I'm glad it's getting you in the feels a little bit.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. Kind of puts it all in perspective.
So we have a lot of listeners who are musicians, and some of them are gearheads. So for our gearheads and for our drummers, can you share a little bit about the equipment you use to get your signature sound on the drum? So maybe the kit you use, the sticks. I'm not sure all the various parts of the drums, but whatever you can share. I know you have a lot of sponsorships as well.
Yeah, I'm currently using Sawtooth drums. They're a newer company, pretty epic stuff. I'm using the Hickory kit. It's pretty epic. they have a small roster, but of legends, they have Vinny Appice. He's like one of their top drummers. You might know him from Black Sabbath, Dio, pretty legendary. They have Michelangelo Becchio on guitars, Rudy Sarzo on bass. The bass and Dorsey. These drums are solid, man. I honestly, it's probably my favorite kit that I've ever had to date. That's what I'm currently using. Um, Back in the Saliva days, I mainly used Mapex drums, um, Peisty cymbals. They're pretty epic. DW pedals is what I'm using for the kick, the double kick. But yeah, Sawtooth and Chromacast hardware. It's pretty amazing. Newer company out of LA. Like I said, you should, if you're a drummer, go check them out because they're gonna be massive, man. Their stuff is super, super quality, and it's like they just sound hugely powerful right out of the box.
And for drumsticks, is there a big difference between different drumsticks, between thickness and sizes? And as a guitarist, I'm not familiar with the difference you can have in feels for drumsticks.
There absolutely is, and I'm currently endorsed by Vader drumsticks. I use 5B nylon tips. As far as different drumstick companies go, it really comes down to personal preference. You know what I'm saying? I when I first started playing drums, I used ProMark and I used them for a lot of years, and they were great. Somebody handed me, I think I was out of drumsticks one night, and some other drummer said, "Here, you can have these," and they were Vader. And for some reason, when those hit my hands, I was like, "These just feel like me." So I stuck with them. But definitely, size of drumsticks makes a huge difference. And again, it's personal preference. Some really heavy players like to play with big sticks. I used to play with 2B nylon tips, and they're massive sticks. And we were on tour with Kiss and Aerosmith, believe it or not. And at that time, Peter Criss was playing drums with Kiss, and his niece was out on tour with him and his wife riding his bus, and we were hanging out because she was kind of like our age, um, and we would kind of hang out every day. And I gave her a pair of my drumsticks, and I guess she showed them to her uncle Peter Criss, and so like a couple days later, she goes, "Oh, I got to tell you, my uncle told me to tell you, you should really like get smaller sticks because these big sticks are going to wear out your elbows and your wrists." He's older, and he was like, if he could give you one piece of advice, is size down. So I actually switched down to 5B nylon after that, and I'm glad I did.
A little Kiss advice.
Yeah, yeah. You take the advice from if somebody's been out there longer, and you should probably listen to them. you know.
That's smart. Let's talk about the new single now. We started the interview by talking about the new single "Bad News" that was released. We've worked our way all the way back up here. So I'm just going to drop a few stats and then we'll talk about it. So the video, the song in the video just came out, I believe, on Friday. I believe it had been 5 or 6 days since it's been out. It already has 70,000 views for the video on YouTube. At radio, it's number 5 for the greatest gainer and number 2 for the most added at radio. And rounding out the top 10 are a few small bands. Metallica, have you heard of this Metallica band? Daughtry and Foo Fighters. Those 3 bands are behind you in that top 10 list. And we mentioned that Metallica, Master of Puppets, kind of started your journey. What does it mean to you to look, and at least for the week with the new single, you're actually ahead of some of your idols here at radio?
Yeah, even if only for a week, I'll take it. But again, I mean, it is epic that probably, the band that started it all for me. Even if they're ahead of me on that, just seeing on that same chart, but to be doing that with a band with my sons, I keep coming back to that. It's like, I can die now, it's like, what else could I possibly accomplish in music at this point? I guess one of my other goals is and we're going to get into the management company thing, is to get one of the bands I manage to have that kind of success. I guess that's the only place I have left to go, as far as goals and lifelong dreams.
Well, if we look at all your past successes, the goals you've set and you've achieved, if we're following the pattern here, it looks like with the management, these bands are going to get where they need to go, which is awesome. So, you mentioned to me that the single "Bad News" is off an upcoming EP of the same name. So, can you give us the fans any details about this upcoming EP? Maybe potential release date, how many songs, that kind of stuff.
The EP is also going to be called Bad News. There's going to be 5 songs on it. Um, and what we're doing is we're going to release probably 4 singles, um, a couple months apart. We're putting out Bad News now. We'll see how it does on the charts, and if it keeps climbing, we'll kind of wait a little bit. But we'll probably release 4 singles back to back, and then on the 5th single, we'll release the whole thing as an EP. That's kind of the new way of doing things these days. It helps with the algorithms on all the streaming services and all that good stuff, and it's just kind of the new way. I really do miss the days where you just drop a whole record and you buy the record and you put it in and you just hit play and you listen to all the songs. But unfortunately, times have changed. So I would have to guess with that release schedule, the full EP probably won't come out until early 2024, something like that. So we'll be stretching it out until then. And then we already have plans to do another 5-song EP after that. And currently in our song folder, we probably have 15 or 17 songs. So we're constantly writing new ones all the time and stacking them in this folder. So I think we're good to go for the foreseeable future. And a lot of times we'll be like, all right, this is the next single, but then in the meantime, we'll write one that we feel is even better than that. So we'll just bypass and drop that out. We already have the next single. The next single after this is going to be called Flatline, and it's actually about one of my best friends for life, Wayne Sweeney, who was the lead guitar player of Saliva. He passed away earlier this year, and my son Sean actually, right after Wayne, they were really close with Wayne. Zach and Sean, not so much the other kids, but Zach and Sean grew up when, they called him Uncle Uncle Wayne. So when that news hit, everybody was pretty devastated, and Sean sent over this song idea, and I like instantly started bawling, man. It's so powerful. So that's going to be our next single after Bad News.
And it's already recorded, or it's?
It is, and actually, our mixer Jonathan Dolise, I believe, is almost wrapped up with the mix on it, and then so probably sometime in September we'll shoot the video for it, and then whenever Bad News runs its course, that'll be the next one up.
And do you think around the release of that EP, do you think you'll be booking shows in support of it, or tour in support of it? And if so, what can fans expect from a Coldwards show?
We are definitely planning on doing some shows, later this year to support that, and then trying to. Right now, we're currently submitting to all of the festivals for next spring and stuff. So the plan of attack would be more so 2024, but we're definitely going to be doing some shows this year as well, sporadic shows, and fans can expect a high energy show that we make it a point to try to sound as close to the releases as possible. We're not one of those bands that like you show up and it just sounds nothing like the record. We try to stay true to form. And like I said, with Zach and Sean, with having 2 vocalists as well, there's a lot more action happening. Just show up and prepare to get, to see a really killer show.
So the last guest that I had on this podcast was also a drummer. So Dan Todd, he was the drummer for the multi-platinum bands Platinum Blonde as well as Honeymoon Suite, so massive bands here in Canada. So Dan Todd actually had a question for you, a fellow drummer. His question is, while on tour, if you could ask for anything on your rider, regardless of price, what would your dream rider look like?
Man, I'm a pretty simple type of dude, man. Usually even on my riders, like clean socks.
New socks. The most important thing, yeah.
Because when you're on the road, definitely when you're a drummer, you're sweating into your socks, and keeping dirty socks in your laundry bag till the next time you get to a washing, facility is probably not going to end up well. So if you can get some new socks on your rider every day, you can, just wear a new pair and kind of throw the old ones away instead of toting them around. I know it sounds very simple, but I'm a pretty simple type of dude. It doesn't really take a lot for me to, be appreciative these days.
That's funny. You have the divas like J-Lo that requests an all white room. Everything has to be white. And then you have Paul that just wants a pair of clean socks. I mean, is that too
That's
much to
it.
ask for?
That's it. Now maybe back in the day, I would maybe put like crab legs or something on there for catering. You know,
That's
doesn't take much to make me happy these days. I'm just appreciative that I wake up every morning at this point.
So I have a hypothetical question for you. So I want you to imagine that we're 100 years into the future or 500 years into the future. So most of today's music has disappeared from public consciousness, but just one Saliva song and one Coldwards song are able to survive into the future that people can still listen to. What song, one song from each band, would you choose to best represent the bands for those future humans when we are no longer around? So it doesn't have to be the band's most popular songs, but just for you that maybe you feel best represents each of those bands and the music.
For Saliva, it would definitely have to be Click Click Boom because even though Always was our biggest hit, if you most people you say Saliva to, they're instantly gonna think of Click Click Boom. So I think that would define Saliva. Um, and as far as Coldwards goes, with our small catalog so far, I mean, if I had to pick right now, it would probably be Whirlwind. But I think Bad News is going to end up being that pinnacle song for us, or one of them. In the future, I'd probably pick Bad News at this point.
Those are two good choices. And to support what you said about Click Click Boom, yeah, to me, that's the song when I think of Saliva, I think Click Click Boom. And I was actually surprised to see that technically, on paper, Your Disease, Ladies and Gentlemen, always, I think technically were bigger singles, but to me, I always associated that with the band.
Absolutely, it just kind of it's what most people think of whenever they think of Saliva for sure.
Yeah, maybe because it was such a unique chorus and it kind of stands out as its own thing. So one final thing about Coldwards, and we'll dive into your management company. I have kind words from another member of the band. Can you handle some more kind words, or are you all kind worded out?
No, man, I'm trying not to. It's too much, man. You're giving me too much. Yeah, let's hear it for sure.
Okay, cool. So this is you mentioned this is one of your best friends. So this is from Richie Hay, bass player in Coldwards. He says, "Oh yeah, Paul, my good friend. I've known for many years. Even shared the stage with this cat for a few months with my other band, Erase the Virus. He actually played guitar, and we always talk about that. How diverse a musician he really is. We would sit in his studio for hours just writing jingle after jingle. We became friends right off the bat when we first met years and ages ago, LOL. When he says we're family, he means it. We always share fun stories of the past, and I have nothing but great memories of my homeboy." So that's from Richie.
Pretty epic and pretty spot on for sure. Again,
So let's dive into your management company. So Paul Crosby Management, PCM, it's artist management and development. Man, I have a list here. So you manage Dark Remedy, Hostile Within, Limber Lost, Beautiful Skeletons, As Tides Rise, Shades of Raven, Beyond Today, Drowned Again, Silent Theory, Unchained, and Coldwards. Man, do you have help? Because I don't know how one person can look after all those bands.
well, I do it. I want to make sure that things get done, so I do it all myself. But also, this is my day job, so to speak. So I'm actually in my home office right now, and so this is my 9 to 5, which I say 9 to 5, but it's usually 9 to 9 at night, depending on what I need to do.
From when you
Uh,
wake until you go to bed, essentially. Yeah.
that's it. That's it, man. And squeeze whatever in, take a lunch break. Um, my bands aren't super needy, and I try to make sure I get something done for each of them every day, regardless. And some of my bands require a lot more attention than the others. I just make it work, man. I stay at my desk until I'm done doing what I need to do for the day, man. So I'm grinding it out. And like I said, man, um, one of my other goals is to have some, or all or whatever of the bands I work with achieve some of their dreams and goals, man. And in order to do that, you got to hustle and grind, man. That's just the way it is. He who grinds hardest gets the prize. So
So
having the history of this being my full-time job, it's I have the time. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, so I looked into some of the bands that you manage, and one band that stands out is Silent Theory. So it looks like you've been working with them for a couple of years now. They have a new single, "Just My Luck," which features Josie Scott. So we're bringing everything full circle with the original Saliva singer. The band's videos have over 65 million views on YouTube. The band's music has over 20 million plays on Spotify, and they have an average of 325,000 listeners per month just on Spotify. So if you take the numbers from Apple and YouTube and all, Tidal and everything, who knows what the numbers are? What can you share with our listeners about that band? We'll drive all our listeners to go check out their music as well.
I've actually been working with Silent Theory. I want to say probably this may be our fourth year together. But over the last 2 years, lots of bigger things started happening. Um, we got them signed to 1 RPM, which is a independent label, but a pretty big one. I always just, for some reason, when I first started working with that band, I always connected with them, and I was believed in them. I believe in all of my bands, but I was like, I think this band's got a good chance at making some headway. And then lo and behold, they're doing it. And obviously they were, when they were writing for this album cycle, when they got their 1 RPM deal, they were like, we want to do some features, man. Who would you recommend? I was like, dude, how about Josie Scott? That'd be pretty cool. And then, I reached out to Josie, and he was like, yeah, I'm in. And we flew out. Me and Josie flew out to Spokane, Washington. The band is from Idaho. And he went in the studio, dropped that whole verse, and then we took a dinner break and then went right in and shot the video, like all in that same day. It's pretty amazing, man. They're really talented dudes, really great guys, and we're gonna keep pushing until they're at the top of my roster. They're so far. So we're going to just keep pushing until we can blow them up, man.
So I was able to infiltrate the Silent Theory camp, and I have our final quote of the interview from drummer Mitch Swanger. And this is like, he wrote a novel. So this guy must really like and respect you. So this is what Mitch has to say. This is a long one. Here we go. I'm not sure where to even begin, as a lot of the time it still doesn't even seem real. Growing up, I was a diehard Saliva fan. In fact, if you listen to early Silent Theory, you can definitely hear the influence Saliva had on our music. Years later, when we got a message from Paul about possibly managing us, we thought we were being punked. We almost didn't even respond. I'm glad we did, though, because it's been one of the smartest decisions we've ever made as a band. 15-year-old me would have never imagined Paul would be managing my band, but here we are. He's been able to take us to completely new heights and way beyond what we thought was even possible. We are honored to not only call him our manager, but also a friend and brother. Aside from his vast knowledge and wealth of experience that he's been able to share with us, he's truly one of the most humble people we know. He believes in giving back and helping bands like us strive to meet our goals. You could probably count on one hand the amount of multi-platinum artists that would be willing to invest their time and energy into an up-and-coming band. And Paul is right at the front of that line. So thank you, Paul, for everything, for taking a chance and believing in a band from small town Idaho. We are forever grateful. We love you, man. That's from Mitch Swanger.
Man, that is incredible, dude. Making me blush again, dude. What's the cool thing about hearing stuff like that is it makes my efforts makes it worthwhile. I know I'm doing something right, and that's awesome. that's, like I said, my main goal when getting into management was to try to help some of these other, younger bands get to experience some stuff that means a lot to them. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I can't make my dates blush, but I can make my interviews blush. So there that's a start. So we're talking about management for our listeners who aren't familiar with the business side of the music industry. What would you say are the responsibilities of a manager?
Whew, man, there's a lot of those. Well, management in the current music industry is a lot different than it was, like, let's say, when Saliva got signed, because you have a lot more jobs on the spectrum now as a manager. But really, I think the most important thing is to figure out with each individual band what their goals are, what it is they want. Because believe it or not, every band, you would think if you just asked every band what are your goals, they would all say to be huge rock stars. That's actually not the case. Every band I work with has a whole completely different set of goals and what they would like to accomplish. And the most important thing is to understand that and focus on the things that are most important to them first. Um, that's a pretty big responsibility in and of itself. But what I also do is I'm not a booking agent, but I try to find them national tours, festivals, PR. Like back in the Saliva days, the manager just managed, and then you had a PR person, and you had a booking agent, and you had all these outsourced things. And now it's kind of like it's your job to kind of figure all of this stuff out collectively and make it work. Go out there and try to find whatever opportunity you can for your artist, regardless of how small you might think it is, because at the end of the day, you're winning over people one at a time. So let's say you get a band on an independent radio station that has 300 followers. That might not seem like a lot, but if you get 10 new fans out of that and you keep repeating that, eventually you're going to have 300 and some thousand monthly listeners, like Silent Theory. Um, there's no opportunity that's too small. And like I said, the main thing is just to understand what each individual band, their goals are, and work with that.
So I guess as a manager, you would sit down with the band, you would create a common vision for the future, you would figure out what the end game is, what the goals are long term. And then I guess you oversee the day-to-day things that get you step by step closer towards those goals on a specific timeline. Is that almost accurate?
That's very accurate. And the other thing too is, up and coming bands typically all have day jobs. So I man the fort. I can do all of the stuff that would take them 3 times longer to do because they only have a couple hours a day to work on stuff. Whereas I'm in my office, getting their to-do lists and then stuff that I just naturally know that we need to focus on. And I'm grinding that out all day, and they can just focus on writing music and being musicians, being in a band.
So you've had a lengthy career in the music industry. How do you keep this fun? You wouldn't be hustling as hard as you are now if you weren't still having fun. What's the secret to longevity here?
You have to be passionate about it. Like I said, from the time that switch flipped when I was probably 13 and I was like, I want to do music for the rest of my life. I never grew out of that. So being in management, I'm still able to do music. It's still music even though I'm working on somebody else's band. It's my passion. It's not what I do, it's who I am. It's just what's in here. That's it. I don't know anything else, and I don't want to know anything else. I'm still passionate about it as I was from day one.
So we like to end the interviews with a rapid fire questions section. So are you okay if we blast through as quickly as possible? I got a bunch of questions I'll ask quickly. You can just answer quickly, whatever comes to the top of your head, and then we'll wrap everything up with a nice bow. Does that work for you?
I'll do my best. I'll try to fight my ADHD and see what happens here.
We'll see if we can focus here. So rapid fire questions. What would you be doing if you didn't become a musician?
I I would probably still be doing HVAC.
Did you ever get to a point where you seriously considered quitting the music business? I guess outside of when you found out your partner was pregnant.
No.
What is your craziest, sweetest, funniest, most memorable fan interaction you've had over the years? Anything that stands out from a fan?
Yeah. Um, I can't remember the specific venue, but I do remember we always made it a point back in the day to immediately go to our merch table and meet as many fans as humanly possible. We wanted to be accessible because when we were kids, our idols weren't accessible. You went to the show and the show was over and that was it. Um, but I remember signing autographs, and I remember a kid who was a teenager saying, um, there was two incidences actually, and one was a kid was saying he was contemplating suicide, blah blah blah. He was going through rough patch, and one of our songs stopped him from doing that. The other one was another kid, also a teenager, saying that him and his dad didn't really have a good relationship his whole childhood. They kind of were drifted apart, and one of our songs they were both fans of, and somehow that song, their love of that song, made them reconnect. And he was like, "And here's my dad," and introduced me to his dad. So it was like that makes you like our music is impacting people. You know what I mean? That'd probably be it.
That's amazing. If you could form a super group and you could pick a dream list of musicians, who would you pick? So you'd be on drums, I guess pick a bass player, a guitarist, and a singer.
My dream group is the group I'm in, but if I had to pick out a super group, I think Ben Burnley would be guitar and vocals, bass. Man, maybe Rudy Sarzo probably, man. He's a legend, and I mean, just, you can't really deny that. Um, that's that. I
There
mean,
you
the
go.
three work.
You're a three-piece because Ben can sing and play guitar. Which musician or band were you the biggest fan of before performing with them? So maybe with Saliva, you were on some amazing bills. Any bands you were a big fan of before sharing a stage with them?
Lots like Corn, Kiss, Aerosmith, um, Stained. Um, I mean, all of those big bands of the early 2000s, even though some of them came out close to the same time as us, we didn't start touring immediately. Our first single came out, and it was like 6, 8 weeks before we started touring. So those other singles were out, and I'm like, I love these bands. And
What's the biggest concert that you've ever played, and what was it like to play to a crowd of that size?
I want to say, to be honest, that Toronto Skydome WrestleMania might have been the biggest actual at one time crowd that I can remember playing.
So it's that arena is 55,000 people. Just
55,000. I don't know of another one that had more at it. We played many big ones, but like the Kiss Aerosmith tour was sold out every night. But I think those were like 20 to 30,000. I think Toronto Skydome might have been the biggest, and if you add in the live pay-per-views,
oh yeah.
yeah.
You can't touch that. What is the best live show you've ever seen? So this isn't Saliva, it's you as a fan going to see a concert. What's the best concert you've ever seen?
Man, Shinedown, Slipknot. The Slipknot show was pretty epic. Those are two of the really the biggest ones I would have to say. There's so many though, not to discredit anyone else, but just rapid firing. Those two probably come straight to mind.
Nice. Yeah, I've seen Slipknot three times. They're amazing. And I was at a festival in the US and I saw Shinedown, and man, that singer can sing. Whew.
Brent is probably, if not the best, definitely one of the best singers in rock in our time, in our lifetime.
Are there any artists or bands that you listen to that would surprise our listeners? So maybe like a guilty pleasure listen.
Yeah, man. I try to tell people, like, if you could see my playlist, it's everything from Garth Brooks to Cannibal Corpse, man. I listen to a lot of country. In fact, in my truck, when I go and run errands, it's on a country station. I listen to country pop. I don't really see genres. If I hear a song that grabs me, I like that song. So Taylor Swift, Jelly Roll's really huge in my playlist right now. But yeah, I mean, I like a lot of country, a lot of pop, rap. everything. If it grabs me, I'm in.
I think you just covered the absolute widest spectrum. When you say Garth to Cannibal Corpse, I think that's as wide extremes as you can go.
Yeah.
Do you have $1 million idea that you're sitting on? And if so, can you give us a little hint at what it is?
I mean, I don't, man. Win the Powerball.
That's not a bad
Yeah,
idea. If you could sit down for a conversation with anybody, who would it be?
alive or dead?
I
Or
guess it could be either. Yeah.
man, Jim Morrison would be pretty epic to be able to sit down. He was such a unique, personality. Just rapid firing. I guess that would probably be my first choice.
Yeah, unique and talented, and I'm sure he'd have stories for days.
Oh yeah,
What is your biggest fear? So these are our three final rapid fire questions.
heights. I'm completely petrified of heights.
Fear of heights. All right. What are things outside of music that bring you joy?
Family and my dogs. I guess
And
that I'm pretty simple type of dude. I don't really do too much crazy stuff, man. I like to travel. I love my family and my dogs, and then music.
all you need is family, dogs, and a new pair of socks, and
That's it. Well,
and
socks are important.
and you're happy. Final question from the rapid fire section. If you were wrongfully accused and ended up on death row, obviously you didn't do it, you're a nice guy. What would your final death row meal be? So I guess meal, dessert, and drink. That's what we'll give you. What do you choose? Meal, dessert, drink.
Lobster, cheesecake, and sweet tea.
Wow, that was fast. I feel like you've either been on death row before or you've had someone ask you this question. Who knows?
Well, I've had people ask me what my favorite foods are, and it's seafood and Korean food. Those are my top two, food. So that one's pretty easy. And cheesecake's my favorite dessert. I'm like, if I see a cheesecake, I gotta eat a piece of it.
Um, So just a few questions left. These are not rapid fire. You can take your time. They're a little bit deeper. Do you have any dreams that you still haven't attained? So you got the Grammy nominations, the platinum plaques, the number ones. Any dreams still in your heart that you're working towards?
Well, definitely, you know, to be on the top 10 of the Hot 100 Billboard charts with my sons in a van, that would be one. And the other one would be one of my bands I managed to be, top tier arena band.
When you look back on your life and career, what are you most proud of and what are you most grateful for?
I meant grateful for all of the blessings that I've been given by a higher power, to have all these successes and check off all of the goals, that any musician would probably have. And grateful that I've been able to make a career out of it and support my family, and I'm still doing it. So, because as we know, man, life for professional musicians, for the most part, it's a very limited thing. You're not, which is also why I'm into management, because about halfway into the Saliva ride, I kind of was like, hey, this is not going to last forever. I should start focusing on the business side so that when this ends, I can continue on. So that's when I started paying attention to what our managers were doing, booking agents, and kind of keeping it in here so that I could start learning that game.
So final question. If you could go back in time and you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self and you could whisper words of advice. So taking all the years you've had since then of experience and mentorship and lessons and highs and lows and dreams and heartbreak, if you could put that all together and you got cute little 10-year-old Paul sitting there, what advice do you provide to help him navigate through this human experience?
I would say be an astronaut. If I could go back knowing what I know now, I would definitely either work for NASA or be an astronaut. I know that sounds weird. I'm a huge space nerd. So that would be a whole different set of advice, I guess. But if I could go back and change everything, I would definitely done that. I know it sounds odd, but I'm kind of a nerd.
That's pretty epic. So as we wrap up, where can our listeners find you online? So if they want to, I guess a website for Coldwards, and then for you, maybe some social media if they want to see updates of what you're up to, if they want to maybe slide into the DMs and say, hey, I love the interview, or I need a drummer for something, or my band's looking for management. How do they stay in touch?
Well, for Coldwards, we have our www.coldwards.com, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of those normal things. Um, and then for Paul Crosby, for myself, my personal page, I kind of keep for friends and family, but the Paul Crosby management page, which is facebook.com/Paul Crosby management, you can reach me. Anybody can reach me there. You can inbox me there. If you just want to chat or submit a band or ask me for some advice, you can easily reachable there. And one thing I've been asking everybody to do on every interview I'm doing is, as a new band, because Coldwards is a new band, even though I've had success with Saliva, out of all the social media stuff, the hardest thing to do is to get YouTube subscribers. I can tell you that, like, from experience. So what I'd like to ask everybody to do is go check out our stuff, go to our YouTube channel and watch our videos. And if you like it, please hit that subscribe button. You know what I mean? And do that for any band of your favorite bands. Even myself, for a long time, I would go watch my favorite band's videos and never even thought about hitting the subscribe button. That actually is one of the biggest ways that your bands actually can generate income as well. Because like I said, music's pretty much free. So do me a solid, go to the Coldwards YouTube page and hit subscribe.
Yeah, I can vouch for that it's one of the hardest things when growing, a new brand. It's getting those subscriptions on YouTube. So our listeners, go do that. Is there anything you'd like to say to the fans that have supported you from the very beginning? Maybe they go all the way back to 1999. Any words for the fans as we wrap up?
Thank you for everything and allowing my life me to accomplish all of my goals, because at the end of the day, it does not matter how big your band is. Without the fans, there is no your band. So, and I think, all bands should have that mentality. Without them, there's no you.
So as we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a drummer. I want to thank you as a fan for creating and releasing great music. So Saliva, I mean, that was the soundtrack to my teenage years. I want to thank you for the album you released last year with Coldwards. It's a great album that I've got on my playlist now. I want to acknowledge you for the work you're doing in management. So taking all the lessons you've learned, taking your skills, taking your passion and helping the next generation of bands so that they have a chance to have a career in the music industry. They have a chance to maybe taste the same success that you've achieved over the years. And then last but not least, I want to thank you for this interview. As a longtime Saliva fan, I was able to ask questions I've wanted to know the answers to for a long time. So thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, man. It really means a lot.
You're very welcome. So to the Paul fans, to the Saliva fans, to the Coldwards fans, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's episode of the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. What I want to know is, who would you like me to sit down with next for a 2-hour deep dive interview? You can let me know by reaching out to me on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel. And you can find me on Twitter and Snapchat at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.